Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I'm Alex Handy, Senior Editor of SD Times, and I'm welcoming you to the webinar on how to consistently achieve higher quality with application release automation, hosted by Electric Cloud and Polarion. We will be joined by David Merrill, Director of Technical Services at Polarion Software. David has over 20 years of experience in engineering for enterprise software solutions and leads the technical team at Polarion, working with prospects and customers throughout North America and the Asia-Pacific region to implement Polarion's highly flexible and open architecture. We will also be joined by Scott Wilson, Director of Deployment Solutions for Electric Cloud. Scott has over 20 years of technology-based experience, including software development, pre-sales, professional services, and management, and has been continually recognized as one of the top-performing professionals throughout his career. And with that, I will be handing this over to David and Scott. Take it away, David.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's certainly a pleasure for Polarion to participate with the SD Times and my colleague Scott Wilson at Electric Cloud. My agenda today is fairly simple. I'll be talking a little bit about Polarion as an introduction to those of you who are unfamiliar with us as a company, but speaking primarily on the type of differentiators that exist with Polarion ALM in meeting the creation and development of the applications that will be part of this ARA process. After speaking to some of those differentiators, I will be doing a live demonstration, and I certainly encourage you to put down the questions later on at the end of our broadcast. About Polarion, we were founded in 2004 with a disruptive vision, primarily to build a browser-based ALM system to break down the barriers that might exist in a product development environment. We've been focusing on unlocking traceability and having real collaboration through a very simple to implement interface. And we've seen continual growth over the last 10 years to the number of users and the type of customers and companies that use our solution. If someone asks me what I do at Polarion or what Polarion is, and I try to explain the world of application lifecycle management, sometimes their eyes glaze over. But if instead I start to talk about our global presence and the type of partners that we have worldwide, technology partners such as Electric Cloud, that we begin to branch out and work with quite a lot of industries touching a broad customer base. This is what really gets me up in the morning. I love our customer stories. As working in field engineering, I am often on site working hand in hand with our customers as they try to solve some of the challenges that they have to automate the application development, to make sure high quality and regulation compliance is observed. So if instead of talking about that, I say really what I do is I help aircraft stay up in the air, the health and maintenance of helicopters for medevac choppers. Sensor systems, as this customer case example provides us, that are placed in the helicopter and feed databases to make sure that planned maintenance is reduced and that emergency conditions such as rotors out of balance or pending failure in flight are directly advertised to the pilots of the aircraft. And with that more complex software engineering that builds not just software by itself, but an interwoven relationship with the full mechatronics of electrical and mechanical systems. We see customers saying things like this, that when their process is built into Polarion, that becomes certifiable, and they know that each and every Polarion process means that their methods and procedures are followed each and every time. Another example of a customer case as I'm driving down the highway is to see a J.B. Hunt tractor trailer pass me. And so in freight management and transport, J.B. Hunt builds a transportation logistics framework for their customers, using Polarion to implement waterfall and agile development within their company to produce internal and customer-facing applications. And this, of course, includes traditional client-server models. It's web-based so that their customers in the field can interact with the scheduling and routing details of their software. and mobile applications can be present to give that information wherever it needs to be. They have a particular demand of release cadence where not just one application, but a bundle of applications are released into their environment. And most especially with them, they're using Polarion to integrate with a very broad array of third-party tools, so that Polarion, in addition to providing the ability for requirements management and testing, it becomes a system of systems where much of their information can be centralized and reported in one source of truth. So a third customer case that you, I'm sure, have heard about in the news is the emergence of drones and unattended vehicles, unmanned aerial vehicles. And one of the statements made about those is that they're really not airplanes, they're flying computers. It is a platform that happens to be airbound. And with this particular device, there's an extreme amount of compliance where they must observe FAA rules, military rules, best practices of design as the physical equipment comes together with the embedded and user interface software systems that drive this aircraft. So to them, deploying software without quality simply isn't an option. And the overall system that they end up managing, as noted here, takes more people to manage an unmanned aircraft than to fly a manned aircraft. Well, I'm sure you may have also heard about one of the principal challenges to avoid project failures. And one of the things that we learned from the people investigating Polarion and see in reality is that oftentimes project failures come from organization of information, poor business analysis capabilities. And so here's some examples of a study done by the IAG Consulting Group that show us some of the tangible elements of failure: excess budget, loss of time, increased cost when companies implement programs and projects without tying together a comprehensive notion of how the top-end, middle, and detailed requirements are elicited and managed and result in the software that will be released into their environment. Well, that's obviously what we're trying to solve with Polarion. So some of the key differentiators of Polarion is to break down the silos or barriers of communication. Now, this could be barriers of language, of time zone, as well as disciplines in the engineering environment. If requirements management engineers are not communicating with marketing, not communicating with software developers, they're not plugged into the right kind of testing mitigation, then the silos of information cause some of these problems. With Polarion, we integrate all of those aspects of requirements and test, issue management and tracking, managing change controls and reporting on it, and also addressing product lifecycle engineering and variant management. But largely what we're going to focus on in the second half of today's presentation is how all of this information that comes together in traditional software development and testing is going to allow that build and release management to have a new and innovative life with Electric Flow, with Electric Cloud, so that the DevOps and deployment where ALM sometimes traditionally ends really will become part of the application lifecycle, the true end-to-end delivery and management of the software in front of the customer. Polarion is very, I should say it's very important to Polarion to enable standards and regulatory certification. As an example, there's an automobile regulatory standard called ISO 26262. That's very important for our customers in the automotive environment to be able to allow to provide the products and services that we use in our own vehicles. Polarion has built-in automated planning and tracking, which we'll see a little bit later, so that we can intuitively create the plans of the type of releases of high-level, mid-level maintenance branches, as well as perhaps the more tactical iterations of of sprint or Scrum-based software development. And we'll see that a little bit later on. Again, one of those elements that comes off of the pages of, say, a Microsoft project plan sheet and comes into the vibrant environment of Polarian. We want to be able to integrate risk assessment and risk management with the verification and validation processes that are important to ensuring quality. We don't want them to stand alone, but want them to be a very vital part of the same development and requirements management process. The reporting capability in Polarian will be able to get us real-time project status, allowing us to see the tracking of incidents, of low quality requirements, and whether or not we'll be able to meet our times and delivery assessments. With Polarian Variants, we introduce the ability to manage the mass customization and common arrangements of domain-based engineering that will let us build components into our product delivery to efficiently manage dependencies and restrictions as we reuse and put together the right features to the right product releases. And then, of course, some of the most exciting thing that's happening to us also is to extend out into development operations and continuous delivery, going outside of the boundary, so that when I quickly release products safely and according to our process in Polarian, that I'll be able to plug into tools like Electric Cloud, which we'll see in just a few moments. Some of the customer comments that we commonly see is how versatile Polarian ALM is, and how a customer can take the product structure and model it to fit their own business practices. If we were to look at those customer examples I mentioned earlier, or even deeper into that broad customer base and talk to each one of them, we would find that they would begin quickly and easily with out-of-box templates and features built into Polarian, but as they mature in their utilization of the product, they'll branch that solution out so that additional capability that aids their quality, regulatory, and development process is reached. Well, that's enough of my slideshow. I'd like to take the last few minutes and show you some of the Polarian interface. So this is a live product demonstration. I'm going to try to build just a few simple examples. First, I'm going to show you managing requirements in Polarian in an easy document format. Then we're going to participate in a sprint as if we are a software developer working on a task. And we'll end up by executing a couple of final tests in Polarian, getting our product ready for the continuous build and delivery of the ARA process. So I'm going to bring in a Polarian browser. As I mentioned, Polarian is a very lightweight install. There is no installable client. It's a Web 2.0 application. And as we see this specific Polarian project located on a shared server, we will be able to go from project to project and have, as you'll see here, multiple tabs open in my environment. This eLibrary project that I'll be focusing on is a fictitious project of a web application that you might expect to see in a library. And right away on the left-hand side, you can see areas of navigation that I can go to quickly. And in the right area, I have a guidance to the user who enters the project. Am I interested in creating specifications? Would I be working in development or in the testing area? Or do I perhaps want to pull down the latest build of the software for my own testing use? Well, we're going to go right into the specification area. In fact, even before that, we're going to answer a quick question of traceability before we look at that specification. One of the things we might be looking at as we release a product is how well do we cover our general product requirements and user stories with test cases, and what is the result of those last test cases? This is going to help us get ready for release, ready for deployment and testing. And as you can see here, I do have clear areas where I have an expression of a user story requirement and its linked, or shall I say, covered test case that will verify that requirement. And I see the last time this was executed, this failed. So it's a call to action for me to improve the implementation of that user story. Any place where I see an empty cell is an indication to me that I don't have coverage to a particular user story, or I'll call a work item, something that could be a family of requirements or an Agile-based user story. That's a call to action for me to make sure that my testing teams are building test cases, or if I have test-driven development, that the appropriate unit and manual cases are built inside Polarian. Well, how do we get these specifications into the product in the first place? Well, they might start off as a document that you would import into Polarian from Microsoft Word or Excel. And in Polarian, I can have a very easy-to-use interface that looks very, very much like a Word document. But as I move down through the content of this document, you can see that I have a visual change where I can express a business case work item at a high level within a document. I can have system requirements and user stories. I can combine any number of these Polarian work items as content to my document. So instead of having a file on someone's desktop, I have a multi-use document where users can easily come in and create that new user story. As a user, I need to be able to edit the document. And when I save this, all of my saving changes are integrated with all of the other user activity in this document, and I create a new item. Now, certainly I want to collaborate with a lot of my stakeholders, so I might use this opportunity to invite others to come in and comment. And this comment can be easily placed much like I might do inside a Word document, and the comment might be, this user story is not ready to go. So it might be something simple like that. Or I might be ready for a deeper look into the approval process of this particular document. So instead of just displaying comments, I'm going to look at the approval center, where I give the opportunity for stakeholders to come in and positively approve of work items, or possibly disapprove of work items with particular comments. Not ready, not completely defined. This is the type of work that helps us avoid the common failures of a system to deliver the requirements to the end users. And so this is, I'm challenged with a CFR 21 Part 11 compliant username and password challenge, where I have to re-authenticate so that I can provide firm non-repudiation evidence that I, David Merrill, have approved of these items. Well, let's go a little bit further. Let's talk about what happens once these items are planned into a release. So here I'm looking at a Polarian plan where I've defined a version of the released product, or I should say of what I'm planning to release, and I can see at a very quick level what I have yet to do in this project. I have information about the growth of this, of the completion of this release, and I can go in and look at low-level statistics, additional planned iterations, and even start to investigate the specific planned items within this plan. And so if I was interested in now putting a developer hat on, I could open up this sprint iteration, iteration 34. Please don't pay too much attention to the dates here. This is just a project that we keep around for demonstration. But as you can see, I have a burn down chart of the Agile user stories that I have planned to do. I have 34 user stories left to retire. And as I move down through this page, I see very much like a sprint board where I, as a stakeholder, can step in and look at the user story, its number of story points, and the work that's being done to fulfill this. This board wants me to move my tasks from open to in progress to done and ultimately to verified. So let's take this idea that I have a particular task that's in progress, and I'm going to step in here, and just for a moment we're going to pretend that I did something great to complete this task. The task is completed. Software has been written and linked. And when we see this, I'm looking not just at a document view, but a very rich set of attributes that can be defined in my system. This task is going to implement this user story. And as I change this item and move from progress being started to being done, I will allow for the advancement of this particular task through the life cycle of that sprint board. So now with that complete, I can come back to my story here and refresh this view to be able to get the latest information. And when I refresh the view, I'll be able to see where all of the work done in this iteration is affecting my project. Now that in progress task has been moved to the done column, waiting for testing. And that really introduces the next piece that I'll just quickly touch upon, and that is advancing to testing. If I put on a testing hat, I'll be able to enter a workspace that shows me all of the different events that I might do to be able to test a particular product. As you can see, I have a test run already set up, ready to go, which I'll take a look at in this browser view. It shows me how many tests are waiting to execute, how many have previously been executed in a passed or failed state. And so from here, I can immediately move to executing that test, or I'll move on to this other tab here where I can show you that this test execution. We'll start this, and I'll move through as if I was testing this particular test requirement, which is to log on to the portal. Login screen approved, displayed. I can provide textual comments as well as screenshots and other types of attachments. And I can actually also integrate testing results from external sources. And I'll just do this very quickly and provide a step verdict for each of these test cases, or each of these test steps. And finally, to provide a verdict for the test case as a whole. Complete testing, successful. And I will pass that test case. Now, obviously, I'm moving on to the next test case, and the next test case, and the next test case, with my overall goal to be able to provide full completion of this test run, and be able to then verify how that particular test run operates with all of the other test runs, successful and failed, within my environment. And one possible motive for me for testing and generating the failures inside Polarion will be able to look at a traceability table that shows me the user stories, test cases, and defects that still need to be worked on, or new defects produced in testing. Well, I want to thank you for this brief opportunity to talk about Polarion, to show you a live presentation, and I hope you've been able to get an idea of the energy and solution that Polarion can provide. We managed some requirements, we participated in sprint work development, and we've executed some tests. So I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague Scott Wilson, who will continue with the ARA side of Electric Cloud.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country today. I'm going to be brief and to the point here about what Electric Cloud can provide. But as you can see, as a brief summary, we enable DevOps so you can deliver better software faster. What I'm going to do as I go through this, I'm going to give just a brief overview of some of the challenges. Many of these challenges and constraints, I think many of you on the phone or on this webinar will be familiar with. Then I'm going to go into a brief background on Electric Cloud, and then ultimately how Electric Cloud can address these concerns. And I will, as David did, do a live demonstration as well. So the first thing is, as we go through this, is we look at all the different verticals within business: FinServ, retail, healthcare, telecom, automotive, so on and so forth. The thing to really understand is that every company is a software company in the modern era. Fundamentally, that's just the way the world operates today, right? And so what Forrester did is they did a survey of all these companies across these verticals, and they just asked them a very simple question: do you or can you deliver software faster? So of the 100% of those who were surveyed, of those that were surveyed, 58% said yes, they want to deliver software faster, and in fact it was one of their top 3 goals. The challenge or the crux here is that only 12% reported that they could actually do it. That's a huge gap between the wants and the do's in this case, right? So let's take a look at the why that is. Typically, when you start talking about the other side of the fence, right, we tend to talk about in development circles about continuous delivery, continuous integration. We as developers tend to really do well at automating a lot of these redundant, repetitive tasks that we're often responsible for and pushing things into our own environments and perhaps even to QA. But once the requirement, this package, gets pushed over on the other side of the fence, the operations side, we find that 75% of those deployments, or what IT will call a release, are done manually. And since they're done manually, that has the waterfall domino effect into the second statistic here, which is where they say 57% of the applications work and test but fail in production. And isn't that the classic? It works in my environment, but it doesn't work in yours. Well, the challenge with that problem is, even in lower environments, just below production, is that 66% of the respondents to this question report that it's very time-consuming to troubleshoot why the failure occurred. And in production, of course, it's not just not time-consuming. There can be far greater implications than just time, right? There can be fines, there can be SLAs, there can be money tied to it. For example, if we look at the costs of failed releases, these are some of the headliners over the past couple of years of companies that had very public misfires or failures in their production releases. As you see, one of these RBS in the UK, but just to highlight one of these in particular is Knight Capital. They're no longer in business. They were a financial firm, and they had a release when the markets were down over the weekend. And when the market opened and their new software version kicked in, they accumulated a $9 billion with a B dollar position in the market. And as you can imagine, things got very frantic at Knight Capital. But 2 hours later, around 11:30, the New York Stock Exchange said, well, we're done waiting for you. They cut the hard line. Knight Capital was no longer able to make a lot of these false trades that had gone on. And ultimately, they were sold for pennies on the dollar within just weeks of this episode. Now, of course, most, I think, deployments don't go that bad. But the point is, once you start talking about production environments, there's just a lot of regulatory and best practices that have to be followed, or big problems can occur. So, Electric Cloud. Before getting into what Electric Cloud does to solve these challenges, just a brief slide here on who we are and what we do. Of course, who we are is we are the only end-to-end, unified end-to-end DevOps automation platform. That's what we provide. All right, and by end-to-end, I mean all the way from CI into production releases. One of the challenges with a lot of CI tools is that they do not scale to the enterprise, nor do they have a great deal of respect or understanding of the massive infrastructure that they have to play in, as well as the role-based access that in fact are required once you start talking about production environments. Electric Cloud has been in business for about 12 years. We have 170 plus employees worldwide and over 200 customers worldwide as well. So let's talk about the delivery gap. I already mentioned things like continuous integration and continuous delivery, right? Development, we have a bunch of tools here that help us do this. The challenge is, of course, operations has their own set of tools. right? And their own often methods and requirements that they have to adhere to and regulations that they must adhere to. And then, of course, there's the infrastructure. So this gap is actually made up of two predominant problems. Once development is done pushing something or getting something ready for that production or pre-production environment, it goes over this gap into operations. And now operations has to replicate what was done in these lower environments and have to be respective of the infrastructure that the application is going to be in. Certainly we all know that in lower environments, the infrastructure usually is just not scaled up like it will be in its production environment. So of course this creates a gap. As I mentioned on the previous slide, Electric Cloud solution is truly a DevOps solution in that it can encompass your CI practices and continue on and create an automated release process that'll bridge this gap, that'll include respect of the infrastructure, operations needs, and regulatory requirements, as well as the speed at which development is able to produce change and commit change to the production environment. How do we do this? Well, we have our Electric Flow. Now, Electric Flow is a tried and true enterprise class DevOps automation platform. This platform is very mature. It has been around for several years. And what it ultimately provides is the enterprise-grade feature set that you would expect. High availability, high accessibility, scalability. What about traceability? Or another word for it in the operations world is just auditability, being able to know who did what, when, where, and how. All right, security. As I mentioned before, this is key because in the operations world, you just can't have a single person click a button and have everything happen without respect to role-based access. You need to have DBAs controlling their particular parts of the process and your essays and so on and so forth. And though you still may get that single click straight through process to production, these other roles have to play a part in that. And of course, our platform allows for this. On top of this, of course, we then provide flexible automation. We have procedures, which are your predefined processes that need to execute, workflows with approval gates and promotion gates, resources, agents, jobs, scheduling, reports, basically just that visibility and industrial strength automation that is needed when you start talking about production environments, and especially enterprise production environments. And then what we did is we abstracted all of this power and flexibility and put it in the context of a modeled framework so that it's a lot easier to deal with a model, an application model, environments, you've got targets, you've got components, and allow you to kind of separate and segregate and parameterize your deployments so that you can take advantage of this platform without having to go in and just kind of automate chaos. We're helping you actually establish a standards-based, repeatable process throughout the enterprise. Now, what we did recently on top of our platform is we added an application or a UI layer that sits on top of it. It's called Electric Flow or Deploy, Electric Flow Deploy. It is our ARA solution. It sits on top of this platform. So you not only get an ease of use, but you get that enterprise strength automation platform to go with it. And of course, what's really neat is that, like many solutions nowadays, we have a plug-in infrastructure that will then, of course, allow you to take advantage of plugins. So you can take advantage of tools and solutions that you already have today. One of the key advantages Electric Cloud is providing in the marketplace and providing your organization is the fact you will not have to go and rip and replace. If you're using Chef, you're using Puppet to do some of these tasks, great. Electric Cloud can now go ahead and come in and we can orchestrate those, make it part of a greater process. Right? If you want to lay down things in the cloud or in a private cloud, in fact, if you want to actually execute some of your tests, then Electric Cloud's Electric Flow solution is ideal for you, because what this would mean is that we could provision or spin up an environment, lay down a particular version of a particular app in that environment, turn right around and kick off your test cases that you have set up for it, orchestrate that, and then report back to you on the success or failure of that entire effort. And of course, deprovision these environments upon success or what criteria you wish. So I'm about to jump into a demonstration here to show all this. What you're about to see, though, as I've mentioned before, it's a model-driven approach to application release. And what the model allows you to do is to essentially deploy any version to any environment fast and consistently, right? What that consistency means, your deployments into production will become very predictable. We can provide you the run times of these deployments. For me, my background running an IT organization, I find this to be a huge benefit because now instead of we tend to do the fuzzy math in which we try to estimate how much time we may need on a weekend or an evening to get things done. Wouldn't it be great if the Electric Cloud could in fact show you what the past runs were, how long they took, so that you'd have an indication of what future runs would take as well. And of course, that's ultimately what we provide. And lastly, what you'll see is how we have complete visibility into everything that took place. So with that, I'm going to switch screens real quick, and we're going to take a quick look here at the product. So we are looking at the Electric Flow screen, and the first thing you should notice above and beyond how simplistic it is, that there's a great deal of power behind the simplicity of it. We've got applications, environments, and automations. In other words, what we have done is broken down all this complexity to three key and simple things, which is the what, the where, and the how. If you think about it, when it comes to pushing out applications, those are the three fundamental questions at the core of everything. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through deploying an application. Here's an example of my application. Very simple for example purposes. This application is currently in QA. See, it's got a nice colored icon. And if I switch over here so we can see a printout of the database schema, the thing to pay attention to here is not only just the version of the schema, but the fact I have 4 columns on this one particular table. Now, if we contrast this with what I have in production, you can see that the icon here, of course, is black and white, and our schema is different than what we have in our lower environment. So I'm going to be walking you through promoting, in fact, this change into our production environment. So how do I do this? Let's start with the what, our applications. If I click at our application, you can see my application. It's called Storefront. This is the application I want to deploy into my production environment. If I click on the link here, I am presented now with the model of the application. Now, Storefront application is made up of 3 tiers. As you can see, a front end, a back end, and a database tier. Inside of each tier are a set of components. And a component can be, basically a component is an object that references the location of an artifact, and it references the process by which you do something with that artifact. So, for example, with my front end, I could come here and take a look at the artifact that is associated with this particular component here. And you can see I'm getting the storefront, I'm getting a WAR file, I'm getting it from our artifact repository. It says which version that we're starting with, gives me the temp files which to extract it to, the retrieve location, and so on and so forth. Depending, obviously, on where you're grabbing this artifact from, this list of properties will be different. But in addition to just having a set of properties and knowing where I'm grabbing this artifact, as I said, I can define the process by which I will do something with that artifact. I have defined 2. One is a deploy and one is an undeploy. If I click on the deploy, it's very easy to see on this model canvas what I'm actually intending to do. I'm intending to retrieve the artifact from my repository, and I'm intending to deploy it. You notice the little electric plug here. This is because this particular step is using our, in this case, JBoss plugin, and it's now going to go ahead and it has all the pre-plumbing and information set up to interact with JBoss, and ultimately all it's asking me for is just a few pieces of information, which of course I have provided. One of the other things that you will notice as you look at this is that we have some things, such as this guy right here, where I'm pointing to a property. I don't have the actual value stored, I have a reference stored. Now this is key because in my application, this application here, will actually be deployed or can be deployed into any number of environments. It could be deployed to dev, it could be deployed into QA, staging, production, so on and so forth. As you can imagine, and as you all well know, in fact, the environment-specific details will alter the configuration settings of any application. It just will. And so by allowing the application model to reference things that are in fact in my environment model, I get that flexibility of being able to standardize the application and letting it transparently hop between environment to environment. So for example, let's look at my environment. I'm going to go to my QA environment here. It looks similar to the application. It is modeled. It is modeled based on the architecture of the application. I have 3 tiers here as well. Got a back end, a front end, and a database tier. In each one of these tiers, I can define any kind of properties I wish. So, and this is controlled with role-based access. So this is what I was mentioning to before about all the different roles and jobs and SMEs within IT. They get to have their say here. Your DBAs, your SAs, your network admin could come in and put in the specific environment information that is required or that is different between each environment. And then the application model now is just referencing a pointer to that fact. You see here I got one resource associated with each of these here. A resource is essentially an agent where commands are going to be run. So for example, if I were to look at this one, I can see the list of different resources I have defined, and I have selected, of course, this one. Now, what's great about Electric Flow here is that a resource is not really a one-to-one. It's not a rename of an agent. What it is a one-to-many relationship to an agent. So you can define many resources to run against a particular agent. This, of course, has the benefit of having separate ACLs, separate metadata properties, and as well as allowing you to have resource pooling so that you can definitely get things done faster since we support parallelism in that respect. So at a high level, this is what I've got defined. I know what's going to run where in this particular environment. I got a particular set of properties that are defined. Just lastly, to come back here to my application, at the application model environment, not only does each component know what to do with itself, I, of course, then need to define the process to do something with the entire app, not just the individual components, and that's what I have actually done here. I have 2 different processes, deploy and undeploy, and here on this canvas you can see very simply we're actually integrating with a ticketing system. And I should state Electric Flow is defined from the ground up to interact and integrate or interface with any system that has a command line interface, a web service, or API. So that gives you a huge amount of flexibility. Additionally, everything you're seeing me click on to navigate and walk through here, I'll come back here, is that I can actually define the process by which things are going to actually go. Everything you see me click on, rather, there is a backwards or behind the scenes SDK or API. This means you could completely customize the way you'd interact with Electric Flow to suit your needs should you have the need to do that. But essentially, as you can see here, I create a ticket. I then lay down the various components of the front end all in parallel. I then make the database changes. I then go ahead and update the back end components, and then I update the ticket. So with that, let's just go ahead and deploy this application. So from my application list, I'm simply just going to go ahead and click the run process. I'm going to click new. So now that I'm actually from the application, we know what we're deploying. I need to actually define here the how. The how is we're going to run the deployment process for this application. The where at this point is my production environment. You notice that I've got this little icon here called Smart Deploy. This is actually set up so that if there are any components or any artifacts that have already been laid down, we're not going to go ahead and overwrite them. If I turn this off, of course, then I will be overwriting those artifacts. But ultimately, Smart Deploy says, why overwrite something if it's already current and it's already there? And before I click go, I will take a quick detour to come back and say, so since I got Smart Deploy on, what's about to change? Well, this is another thing I want to show here. If I go to my production environment, I can look at the inventory of what has, in fact, been deployed to this environment. You can see all the different versions that are set up that are currently in that environment. But further than that, Electric Flow allows me to compare what's in this environment with what's in another environment. And what we can see here that is, in fact, my production environment is not current. And that's how we have highlighted the two line items, the two artifacts that are different, that are out of sync. This is ultimately with Smart Deploy what we're going to be deploying, these two components here. Smart Deploy has the intelligence to skip these other components by definition. So let's go ahead and deploy the application. We're going to tell it to run a new run. We're going to say deploy. We're going to go ahead and move it into production. I'm going to click go. Now what I can actually see here is the line by line, or the play by play, as it were, of what's happening through the deployment. Every step along the way, I have full visibility and accountability on. I could come in here and actually see at any one step if I wished. I could come here and, for example, click this link and see the details with any particular step. I can see the output for it. I'm never having to guess or wonder what actually occurred. You can actually see what occurred. And just to come back to our application here, let's go ahead and update our screen and see if we've got what we want to have occur here. It's going to take it a second, it looks like. All right, cool. So that is a very quick demonstration of pushing this up. What I do want to do is just to summarize once again from what you've seen what Electric Flow does. What we're offering organizations is to get things done 10 times faster, to produce up to 90% higher quality software, to have cross-team, cross-IT vertical visibility, and ultimately you're able to reduce your costs. And with that, I just wanted to thank you for your time, and I guess we would open this up for questions.
Thank you very much, Scott. I'm going to go